All right, everybody. Thank you for joining today's call. Just a little heads up, we are nearing the end of week 6. We have 2 weeks after this. Anybody that wants to get breakout sessions in before the end of the study, we need to have that done. Today's topic is, how do we use others to put pressure on ourselves for control? Now this one, you would think it would be really obvious, but in each moment that we're doing it, we're missing it. We don't even notice we're doing it. And one of the things to remember is, as we learned in month 1, is we're in control of our entire experience. In doing so, that means any pressure we feel, we're creating, whether we're doing it from mirroring someone else or doing it from taking their reverberation into our system, whether we're collapsing or exploding our energy, any of the things that are happening, it's still us doing it. We can attribute to an outside source, a reference, but we cannot give them the credit for our experience. When we're making a decision that is making our life harder, in each moment, as we're in control of it, what are we doing to put the pressure on us in regards to other people? So for instance, doing the dishes. This is an easy one that I've had to deal with, and it pops up. I'm so surprised how often it'll pop up. Whenever I'm out of balance and I do the dishes, I get lower back pain. It's absolutely insane. It happens every time I'm out of balance. So I have a choice when it's time to do the dishes, either to balance myself first, go through the lower back pain, or not do the dishes. Now, the way this started for me was when I was a kid. In my house, we started doing the dishes at age 10. So here I am, 10 years old, and it's my turn. I'm the third kid in the family, and I get added to 1 day a week of doing the dishes. I'm doing the dishes, and I'm so proud of myself, and I'm so pleased. And, I've done them just fine, in my opinion, because I've watched other people do them. I know this is the way you do the dishes. And a couple of weeks in, one of my parents comes over to me and says, "Well, Chris, you're doing this wrong." And I'm like, "What do you mean I'm doing this wrong? The dishes are clean. I've watched everybody else. This is how you do the dishes." And they say, "No, you're putting too much soap in the water. This is concentrate. You only need 3 drops of soap. And no, when you put them in the dishwasher, if you turn them this way, they're not going to rinse completely. And you're also not wiping the counter down completely." I was shocked at how big this list was of how I was doing the kitchen wrong. And I was, again, so pleased and so proud that I had met the age, and I was part of this group, and I was helping the family. And I didn't realize at the time how crushing it was. But I stopped being me every time I did the dishes, and I started being what my parents wanted me to be. And if it's in one area of your life, it moves into all areas of your life. So at age 10, I gave up a lot of my personal freedom in order to meet the needs and expectations of others. Again, how are we using this to put pressure on ourselves? What kind of control was I creating? I was no longer able to be independent. I was then subjugated to a belief that I accepted from someone else. And you think about this, let's take this into something that most of us do every day as well. Most of us drive a car every day. And when you're driving later today, I want you to pay attention to your thought process when you're on the freeway, when it's time to change lanes, when you're coming to a stop sign, when the light turns green. How much of your thought is the consideration of the other drivers around you? How much of your thought is the consideration of you have to behave a particular way to influence the other drivers around you? And who already can think of ways just today that they've had this impact their lives? So here's the thing to think about too. In each moment, why can you not make a different decision? What are you doing to yourself in regards to your thoughts about others and how you're controlling yourself? Since again, you're the one in control. Why are you not able to make a different decision in the moment? And it goes to what we call habitual. So we become habitual wanting to meet the needs of others. So I became very habitual in how I did the kitchen, making sure that everything was done. And when I realized that a lot of my back pain was tied to this control, I started saying, okay, what can I do differently? And I would notice that when I was ready to do something else, if I would turn and I would see, oh, that pot there is not washed, I'd be like, I thought I was almost free of this. I still got to stop and wash this pot. And I would force myself to stay and complete whatever the kitchen was in order for it to be fully done. Now, there's a benefit and a good feeling to having a job well done, but that's not the same as putting myself out to make the job well done. So, for instance, if I'm a little bit tired and I go to do the dishes and I'm halfway through and I'm like, okay, that's all I've got for today. If I just say, okay, that's it, and I stop, then there's no back pain. But if I say, oh, well, there's only 3 more plates in another cup, I'm just going to wash these, immediately back pain. It's not a maybe. This is something that is consistent in my experience. And I want you, again, to pay attention in your life throughout the next week, because as you start to realize it, it can be really shocking.
So I guess when I'm driving, if there's other people who want to go faster, I feel the need to go a little bit faster so I'm not, like, in the way. Even don't want to go over 75 on the highway.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
And if it's in one place in your life, it's in all places in your life. I know with your relationship with your mother, because you have a young child, that can be something that's happening too, that you start pushing yourself.
So weird, because I was just talking about that I push harder on him because I feel the pressure from my mom, and that's not how I want to act.
Right. I know you're easygoing and very gentle, so that's a tough one to take, isn't it?
And I see it like all the time. If I get more tense and stuff, that's not how I want to be. Like, that's not me.
Now, I know you've been working on this for a bit. By the way, Kelly was in study number 2 that we did, so she has some experience with this information before. So between then and now, your child has grown, and you've become this excellent mother, and I've got to see him at Easter, and he's such a delightful boy. And I do believe that the work that you're putting in and the effort you're making to be more you in each moment is helping him be a more calm and compassionate child as well. Would you agree?
Yes, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, he was pretty active and aggressive when he was younger, and he's growing up to be more like you now, and I'm very pleased to see that.
I hope he continues, because we have a little issues at school, but you pre-warned me about that when he was a baby, that when we got into school there was going to be some issues, but that it wasn't my fault, that I'm doing everything okay. It's just going to be what it's going to be. Working through it.
Awesome. Good job. What we need to look at next is not just that you're feeling this pressure and you're accommodating it, but what is it in you? So let's go back to the driving on the freeway. So when people are going faster and you want to go faster as well so that you're not in their way, what kind of pressure are you putting on yourself?
A pressure to meet other people's needs before my own.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. It can be a couple of different things, but I think that's a pretty good one for you. So you're meeting their needs because you're generous, and you're willing to be generous to the point that you're uncomfortable. Is there anything that you've noticed that will get you to not meet that need? So, like, for instance, if that were me and I saw a policeman, I might feel more influenced by the policeman than the needs of the others around me. So is there anything that you notice?
Yeah, because that's what I think about. I'm like, I'd rather go the speed limit and not have to worry about police around every corner. It's so funny. Because I tell myself all the time, I'd rather be okay when there's a police around the corner than to, like, go faster because I feel uncomfortable. Then I might be tending to the needs of the police, though, to not get in trouble.
Right. Well, that's in the needs of your pocketbook and the needs of your insurance. You know, there's a lot of priorities, right? It's not just one thing. If it's in one part of your life, it's going to reflect in everywhere. So you start, again, looking at consequences, whether they're real or unreal. We're not going to worry about that today, but we start looking at the consequences of things. And so that's one of the parts that's pressuring you is a consequence. So if you don't speed up and there's somebody behind you, they're unhappy. That's a consequence for you, right?
Yes.
You can feel their unhappiness, or do you just imagine it?
I feel like I feel it. I can feel when other people are angry on the road, and it makes me uncomfortable.
Gotcha. Okay. What about when you come up behind somebody that's going slower?
I get upset.
Now, how do you think they feel? They're able to do this, and they're not pressured to do something.
And I'm always thinking about that too. I'm like, because I understand like the needs of others around me, and I'm like, wow, she doesn't care. Like, they don't care. They're fine. They're like living their life happy, and they're not trying to like go faster because other people around them want to.
So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're putting this pressure on ourselves. We have people that don't do that to themselves. And to me, that's a reminder that, oh, okay, yeah, I am doing this. If somebody else can avoid this experience that I'm having, it's possible then that I can avoid it too. So have you attempted at all to move away from that experience?
I don't know. I don't think I put thought into it like that far into it.
Okay.
I have with the situation with my child I have. That's what I've been working on a little bit, but not in the car. But I will.
Okay.
I'll put it in place in the car too.
I do notice that if we pick something that's an easy area to work on and we start to master a method in an easy area, then we can translate it and transfer it into other areas. So with your child, it's easy to work on because of your love for him and because of what you
Mhm.
desire to have in your relationship. And then with the driving, if you just take that and you transfer love into the driving, you love those other people and you know that you're in perfect time all the time, then you can relax.
I remember
Go
that
ahead.
in the first study. That's how I felt. I felt love on the road. That's so funny. So I know what that feels like, and I can do that.
Awesome. Now, for those that don't know what that feels like, you can try counterbalance first. So when the pendulum swings, you go from one experience to the other. And if you can't do it on your own, then you look for a counterbalance. So for instance, I feel like I need to speed up for the people around me. I can go to a counterbalance, which is a safety. And I can say, well, if we're all speeding and something goes wrong, then there's going to be a problem. So if I feel like I don't want to speed, maybe I have this feeling in order to save someone's life behind me, so that they'll be slowed down too. They won't get into an accident. They will be more conscious of their driving. They'll get there 5 minutes later and they won't have a traumatic experience in some way. So you can use a counterbalance to give yourself the internal strength to make the change. The goal is not to do it for these other people. The goal is to realize in each moment that when you're making a decision that you're not enjoying, that you won't have to do that. Temporarily, if you use a counterbalance, it'll give you the space to see something different. Because remember, the subconscious is just providing information based on how you're habitual and what you're looking at. And address the habit from a different direction, then the subconscious then starts to give you support. So this is a temporary fix, and eventually you can just let it go and be in peace and love and joy, however you like to experience your life. It doesn't have to be always, well, I'm just doing this to save somebody else's life, but it is an easy way to start.
I would say there is a tremendous pressure, especially among spiritual people, to be thoughtful and considerate. So, and I
Yes.
think also there is a fine line between getting getting rewarding feelings about being thoughtful and considerate versus getting rewarding feelings about feeling good about myself and just doing what I want. This is kind of a real gray zone where it's very difficult to navigate through that.
Mhm. We talked in the beginning of the study about the religion of others, something that is somebody's personal truth. When they're living their personal truth, it's this great example. It's very exciting. It's everything we want. And then we decide to adopt that same thing without actually embodying it. So we look at it, we know what the end result's going to be, and we just jump to the experience of having it a certain way. So for instance, when I see somebody else do a loving and rewarding thing, and I see the joy in the person that's being helped, and I see the joy in the person that's doing the helping, then this is a warm, cozy feeling. And I say, oh, I want this warm, cozy feeling. So I start giving the same way that I've seen. But what we didn't realize is that there's a whole other story that happens before what we can observe. And there's a lot of stuff underneath all of that process. Michelle's saying is we are told as compassionate, loving, and giving people, to be kind, to be patient, to not overreact, not to yell at people. But what we've given up in that moment is being our truth. And when we're more of our truth, then there's no effort to be what the other person needs in the experience. There's this synchronicity that happens. So I may feel compelled in a moment to yell at somebody, and I need to look at a couple of things in that moment. I can tell myself, no, be kind, and I can just stop. Or I can ask myself, what is my motivation here? Where is this coming from? Is it something inside of me I need to work on? Is this something that matches with the other person's needs? Is this coercion of spirit acting on the group of us to have a different experience? The more familiar you become with all of these realities and all of this information, the more synchronistic you are, the more likely you're compelled to do things that support the effort of healing and wellness, even if it doesn't look like what you think it should look like. So in a moment, I may raise my voice and yell at somebody, and I may be perfectly fine with yelling at them. They may turn around and come to my aid, trying to help and support me. they may turn around and yell back at me and finally have freedom from being subjugated. I mean, there's just so many variables in life. And I believe what this all ties into as well is the concept of cause and effect. With our brain, we calculate cause and effect in one way, but with our mind, it's so infinitesimal, the variables that can be looked at, that the mind is what will actually lead us through synchronicity on the cause and effect side and not the brain. So when we're in fight or flight on a low level, which tends to be the majority of us all day long, when Kelly was talking about driving down the road, she is in a low level of fight or flight. And that's why she is responding and reacting the way she is to those around her, meeting their needs and not her own. If she gets out of fight or flight, she goes into a state of love and this comfort, then she is no longer impacted by them because her habitual is to meet their needs. Her balance is to meet her needs and then their needs, find a win-win. And the mind that can calculate the variables of cause and effect at a much better level than the brain will then supply with, oh no, I need to slow down right now. It's actually going to save somebody's life if I do. Oh, I need to speed up because it meets my need not to hit any red lights. So for instance, when I drive and I'm synchronized, I never hit a single red light. I'm constantly driving at the pace that allows me to just drive without stopping. It is unbelievable how perfect it is for me. And people will get in the car with me and they'll realize that I never hit a red light, and they'll even mention it because it's not a normal thing to do in Las Vegas. And then on a day that I'm out of balance, it is really obvious because I will start to hit red lights repeatedly, or people will cut me off all day long. I'm bringing the synchronicity to my experience that is based on where I am in my life. So we take this back to the idea that if we only do the nice things, if we only the proverb or the belief system of this is what it should look like, then we're back at, well, we should do that. Okay, if you're thinking should, you're already in a place that's outside of yourself because that's not your truth. Your truth doesn't need that kind of thought. So when we're looking at what we can do in each moment with our decisions, it's important to realize pressuring you is yourself. Look at what your motivation is. Look at how you're holding yourself out of balance, how you're jumping to the conclusion that you want to experience versus going through your life to get to an experience. And all of these pieces together will make it a lot easier to realize that the pressure of the control that you're experiencing is just you.
Last week I had some experiences while driving where I was able to see things differently. Like I was driving and some young kids ran across the street and my first reaction was to say, oh, badass kids. But then in that moment, that thought stopped. And I was like, no, they're just trying to get to the other side. They're not purposely trying to disrupt traffic. They're paying attention and they're looking for a path to cross safely. So in that moment, I was like, oh, that was a nice switch of thought. And then the next day, as I was driving to work, a car sped and ran a yellow red light. And again, my first reaction would be, oh my gosh, slow down, think about other people. But then I sat back and I was like, oh, that was me yesterday. And then, which was nice too, because I was like, oh, no need to be upset. Whatever they're going through, I'm safe. I'm fine, right? Nothing has happened. And then the third one, I was driving and I had my daughter in the car. Everyone was going at a decent pace, and this truck decided to drive on the shoulder of the street to pass us all, and there was a huge semi parked up front. And, you know, the reaction is to be angry and be like, oh, what if I just got over and cut them off, and then that idiot would learn their lesson, right? But then as they passed by, I was like, oh, again, I'm safe. My child is safe. There's no need for that. They're fine. They are going to go on, and however they choose to live their life, they do. But in this moment, what I control is fine. Everything is fine. So to have those three moments all last week, I was like, oh, that's different.
Very nice.
So
very
I just wanted
good.
to share.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that input. You're doing very well applying the thought processes of, hey, this is an uncomfortable thought, an uncomfortable feeling. Let me see what's really true here. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Kelly, you had something too?
Yeah, I think I kind of resolved it, though. I mean, I can share it. my mom kind of controls my son through me. So instead of like directly saying something to him, she'll be like, Kelly, you need to do this, blah, 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 blah. And what if it doesn't fit like my needs with my child and it's just her thing? But then I did just do this yesterday or the day before where I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? Okay, can you do it? And I kind of am very calmly and just let her, if she had an issue, how does she want to fix it? Okay, now tell him. And then that kind of was a win-win for both of us. I didn't have to be mean to my child, and I didn't even want to, or I didn't want to discipline him in that moment, and she got what she needed out of it.
And this is another important thing, too, to remember, is each person should have their own relationship with each other person. A lot of times as parents, we want to control the relationships that other people have with our kids because it impacts them in a way. But if we're in synchronicity, if we're in our truth, and we know that our child is living their own experience, they're drawing to them what they need to have, if we trust that and we support them, then they go through something differently. So when your mother wants him to change, if you do it for her, you're not trusting that he's okay. You did it perfect, Kelly, by telling, having the conversation with her, saying, okay, yes, this is fine, go ahead and do this. And then she has her own relationship with him. And it's important that children develop relationships with other people. It's also important that when we see something that happens in our children's relationships that we don't like or appreciate, that we have the conversation with the child, not just the person who's the perpetrator or other things, is talk to your child. How did they experience it? How did they feel about it? Because what you're going to find is when we worry for our children, they might not even have had the same experience. They could have been perfectly fine, but we're picking up something from our own past. We're anticipating that their feelings are hurt or that they're uncomfortable. They could have been fine. So again, allowing our children to grow their own experience, communicating with them, asking them questions, and then supporting a need that they may have is a really positive way to keep going with all of this.
I like that. Even if she yells at him, or I do step in if he's crying, because this used to happen. It doesn't happen too much anymore, but she'll be like, stop crying, and then I go back to my childhood, and that just made me cry more, so I would step in.
Right.
You can't tell him to stop crying, it's going to make it worse. But should I just step back at that point and talk to him after and see how he feels about it?
Okay, so there's a couple of things, and it all depends on each moment. There's not one shoe that fits every foot in this concept. But being aware, okay, you're pushing my child too far. Okay, I am responsible for this child, and I know that you, as the person pushing, is out of balance. So therefore, I am going to stabilize my child by protecting them. There's nothing wrong with that.
So
There's
if it's like an extreme, I know my child is not, it's not okay. Then
correct.
Step in, but if it's like a minor.
It really depends on, again, your observance of the situation, because I have been sometimes where I see something only tiny going on, but I'm like, I don't like the way this feels. So I'm going to go, I won't necessarily interject or affront the other adult, but I'll step in and change the conversation, ask a question. I can interrupt what I see happening versus just watching and disliking it. That's another, it doesn't have to be a conflict, but you can absolutely go and interject something or interfere. I had this one, oh my goodness, it made me laugh so much when I talked about it afterwards, but in the moment, it just shocked me that I even did it. I know that we're not supposed to accept something unless it's a divinity. And there was somebody trying to give my child something from a place of resentment. And I stepped into my child and I said, I wouldn't accept that if I were you. They're not coming from a good place. The whole room froze. And I was just shocked that I talk like this all the time, but in that moment it even surprised me. And my child was like, oh, you're right, I don't want that. And it was something that they were practically begging for. But the other person was like, but I want this for myself. I just have to share with you because it makes me nice. And I was like, oh, you really shouldn't take that. And it worked out to be a good conversation. That's what you can interject. You can become part of the interaction without necessarily it being dramatic or trauma for anybody involved. but I was compelled. See, that's the thing. If I had just thought about it, I would have probably kept my mouth shut. If it was just me being like, oh, I don't like the way you're talking to my kid, I was suddenly compelled to protect my child on a different level in that moment. And like I said, it turned out really well. When we do what we're compelled to do from that higher level, things turn out really well. And Kelly, I think you're getting to a place where you can really feel the difference now, whether it's just you, like it's just you remembering bad things from your childhood, or you can say, no, this is too much.
Yeah. I think that I'm getting a little better about feeling it out. I didn't want to say it, though, because I don't want to come off like, oh, I got this. But I'm getting better, yeah. I can feel more of my truth lately.
Nice. All right, guys. Well, thanks for your participation today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so very
Bye.
much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.